But she's also hoping that people in the near future will own nothing. That's their big answer to income inequality. They've been talking about it at these conferences for years.
Beneath the glitter and glamour of Hong Kong, there's staggering inequality and a crippling housing crisis. There have been months of turmoil and demands for democracy. The violence has hit Hong Kong's reputation and economy, but the authorities are blaming the unrest on one of their most dirty secrets, the scandal of the coffin home dwellers. Many of them are deeply ashamed of their circumstances and ask us not to identify them. They're part of an army of Hong Kongers living below the poverty line in the world's most expensive city, where affordable housing is out of reach to many. This tiny home has been built in the gap between the lift shaft and the supporting walls, and the family and their 6-month-old baby boy basically live on this bed together. They've been here for 4 years, and for this they pay the equivalent of around £1,500 British pounds a month. It's a struggle for survival, and the protests have hit both the Hong Kong economy as a whole, but this family's pay packet too. Do you think the protests will end up with you getting better housing?
I don't know. I don't know, but when it carries on like this, I'll lose my job very soon, and I'll have no money to buy food.
But there are plenty worse off than him. All of these are homes, top and bottom. They can just about fit one narrow single mattress. Here's them all, not even long enough for someone to lie down in, and there are 15 of these in this one room. Take a look inside one of them. It's not even 2 square meters, a home which will cost several £100s per month to rent. And most of the people here earn very little and rely on housing subsidies. This is the dark underbelly of Hong Kong, and understandably it's very difficult for outsiders to get access to them. We only managed it by building up trust with some of the residents. There are an estimated 200,000 people living like this in Hong Kong, and the fight on the streets for votes is said to be central to bolstering the human rights here, which should lead to better living conditions.
They don't think the situation now we can have a chief executive to represent us. So they think the universal suffrage is so fundamental for Hong Kong to solve different social problems.
The coffin home dwellers themselves feel helpless and forgotten by the government and the protesters. This man's been waiting for better housing for 10 years and lived in this box for 3.
Why don't they ever mention the housing problem in the democracy protests? There aren't enough homes and people like me are just being ignored.
Hong Kong's leader prefers to focus on these social issues rather than dealing with the demands for democracy on the streets, which are at the heart of the protests. And the city's poor are mostly voiceless and vulnerable.
As I record this, I'm feeling, well, quite annoyed in some ways at the fact of how we are being played and have been played by this whole COVID supposed pandemic. And I want to show you why it's becoming abundantly clear just how much this was planned and why and what they're using it for, and how we are really just guinea pigs as they push us into a great reset and their increased Agenda 2030 and climate change agenda. This was never really about a medical emergency. That's just the excuse that they've used to push us into the system that they've been planning for a long time, and it's a very convenient way of doing it to have this pandemic as the catalyst to get us where they wanted to go and have always wanted it to go. Now, I'm sure most of you who have followed this channel for any length of time will remember I've covered a number of times Event 201, which occurred last year, October 2019, a 3.5-hour pandemic tabletop exercise that simulated a series of dramatic scenario-based facilitated discussions confronting a difficult true-to-life dilemmas associated with response to a hypothetical but scientifically plausible pandemic. 15 global businesses, government and public health leaders were players in the simulation exercise that highlighted unresolved and real-world policy and economic issues that could be solved with sufficient political will, financial investment and attention now and in the future. And it basically was a run-through for the coronavirus that we have, this pandemic. Plain and simple, and it occurred before the pandemic supposedly began. And take a look at who was backed by Johns Hopkins and Bloomberg School of Public Health, the Centre for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have big input into the whole vaccination thing, as we will see, and the World Economic Forum. And that is what I really want to cover in this video. The link here, look, the World Economic Forum, plain and simple, a sponsor and a backer of Event 201 late last year. Before I get into the World Economic Forum's input, which is the main thrust of this, I want to just play you a short clip of the Weasel Bill Gates and something that he has said. And remember, he has big money invested in Moderna and this whole vaccine.
But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. People don't feel like going to the stadium when they might get infected. You know, it's not the government who's saying, okay, just ignore this disease. And, you know, people are deeply affected by seeing these deaths, by knowing they could be part of the transmission chain, and old people, their parents, their grandparents could be affected by this. And so you don't get to say ignore what's going on here. There will be the ability, particularly in rich countries, to open up if things are done well over the next few months. But for the world at large, normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
So there you go. It's plain and simple. They want everybody vaccinated, and you probably won't be able to buy or sell or get transported anywhere if you don't have their vaccine and their COVID identification.
It's such a clear indicator of the drastic shift in society, not that we're facing in the future and generally down the road, but that is actually happening right now. It's actually taking place. And if you like your doctor and want to keep him, you're going to love this. So this was on wefforum.org. That's the Davos site, Davos Elite. And it was written by Ida Auken, a member of parliament in Denmark. And I checked, and as far as I could find, she hasn't been to Bilderberg or anything like that. But again, she's a member of the Davos Elite.
We are 7 billion people now on the planet. We're going up to 9 billion. Think about 3 billion people entering the middle class, all wanting cars, mobile phones, computers, eating meat. I mean, this is a huge pressure on the resources we have.
But she appears to be what I assume would be a Bernie Sanders style socialist. But she's also hoping that people in the near future will own nothing. That's their big answer to income inequality. They've been talking about it at these conferences for years. They've been talking about universal income, what to do when people can't work. And their answer is people of the future will own nothing. The growing problem of the underman, who's threatened by the rising cost of living, discouraged by the lack of better paying opportunities overall, and all the other factors that go into living in the society that we've been in. And the answer of the 1% who own more than anyone else listed in the phone book, and their answer is that we should own nothing at all. And we talked a lot about the smart city, how much that's being used for control, but this goes beyond anything. It's straight into Marxist serfdom, actually without the problem of work and without the problem of the working man's struggle. So it's neo-feudalism, but with a new twist. Here's how it goes. Here's what Ida Aachen wrote in her column for Davos. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. I sound like I'm from a Dr. Seuss novel. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, these things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much anymore.
Why do you want to own your cell phone? I mean, you want the function, you want the service, right? Why do you want to own a cell phone if you can just lease it? And if you lease, why shouldn't you lease your refrigerator or your washing machine or your dishwasher? Or why do you want to own it? I mean, it's not like the plastic and the metal is like, I own a broke dishwasher. I mean, wow.
Ida Aachen writes that in 2030 in our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we don't need it. Someone else is sleeping in your living room when you're not around or cooking in your kitchen when you're done making dinner. She writes, my living room is being used for business meetings when I'm not there, and once in a while I will choose to cook for myself. It's easy. Even the necessary kitchen equipment isn't owned. It's delivered to the door by drones within minutes. Environmental problems seem so far away, she says, because of course it can never really be that far away from Agenda 21. She writes, the air is clean, the water's clean, and nobody would dare touch the protected areas of nature because they constitute such value to our well-being. No one is allowed to go into the wilderness, but in the cities, there's plenty of green space and plants and trees all over. Do
you know how much a car drives? How much of its life? 4%. Or if you take a drill, it's used 15 minutes. It's not a lot, is it? And most of us, I know there are some guys here that really love to own a drill. But for the rest of us, we just want a hole in a wall, right? And I think we're going to a place where we just want mobility, where we don't care so much about owning a car. It's actually a bit of trouble. If you just come to driverless car and pick me up and I can drive around and this car will be driving all the time.
Things could be taken away at a whim, but even this parliament member from Davos writes about the pitfalls. Once in a while, she writes, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy. Nowhere can I go and not be registered. I know that. I know somewhere everything I do, think, and dream of is recorded. I hope that no one will use it against me. But she still insists that this is a way better society because in the old society, terrible things were happening.
Sounds insane.
Car share for a long time was a problem because people left stuff in the cars and it's a little bit disgusting. But now, you rate people, so you don't leave stuff in the car, you just behave better. So the information technology has made it much more easy to share things.
It's all so stylish. The see-through stores, pristine white packaging, touchscreens, all the more touchable since the company that makes them has been shrouded in tantalizing secrecy. Until now.
I'm told this is the very first time any reporter from any country has been allowed to see this.
We don dust-free bunny suits to watch a room filled with massive robots glide around with sheets of iPad glass.
Wow, look at that. It's like a scene out of WALL-E.
But these lines are the futuristic exception. And with Apple's reputation under fire, we're most interested in the people who build their complex gadgets one tiny piece at a time. As a whole, it's an incredibly complex process, but look at the individuals, and you see mostly teenagers from the countryside, 17, 18-year-olds far away from very poor homes.
So this is home.
They live in a dorm with 7 strangers, spend 6 days a week repeating the same task again and again. Fatigue and boredom are common in any factory, but this one is surrounded by suicide nets. They are everywhere, a horrifying reminder of 18 workers who jumped from the buildings here at Foxconn City in the past few years. The suicide rate in this massive company is lower than average in China, but after people jumped in such a sobering cluster, Foxconn opened a counseling center and raised starting wages about 25 cents an hour. The Fair Labor Association collects employee grievances on, get this, iPads.
You can be honest.
We talked to dozens of employees, on camera and off, and the most common complaint? Low pay. Most, like Zhao Xiaoying, can't afford to live with their own children, much less buy one of the products they help build. While she carves thousands of Apple logos onto the backs of iPads every shift, she's never actually seen a working iPad.
What do you want the people who end up buying this to know about you?
I want them to know me, she says. I want them to know we put a lot of effort into this product, and when they use it, please use it with care.